All right, so moving from music now, let's talk about some TV stuff, some Netflix stuff, right? So we will cover the first season of Terminator Zero. This is actually the first animated series to come out of the Terminator franchise, and the second TV series to come out of that franchise. The first one being the Sarah Connor Chronicles, which is a show
Right.
that I know that you absolutely enjoy.
Yeah.
I still haven't got around to watching that, unfortunately, and I mean, I call myself a Terminator fan, but I will rectify that soon enough, right? Soon enough, right? So, Terminator Zero, what makes this a big deal is not so much that it is an animated Terminator show, but an anime, like the first, if I'm not mistaken, first anime film at all, right? To be based on the Terminator franchise, right? Of course, on this show, we have talked about, the Terminator franchise. In particular, we celebrated the anniversaries of the first two movies, both of which still remain classics to this day. I mean, the second one, in my opinion, is the greatest action movie of all time. That's in my opinion. And as far as the sequels go, well, what I will say right now is that while there are aspects about them that I respect, even like the third one, which I know a lot of people despise, but like there's things about the third one that I respect, right? They don't hold a candle at all. Like none of them were able to match the quality that James Cameron brought with those first two films, right?
Agreed.
Yeah. So here we are, with Terminator Zero, right? And I know, like, with a lot of people, I know a lot of people, fans and non-fans are gonna go into this now and ask themselves, well, after the last four sequels that we got over the past 2 decades, it's like, what this show really gonna bring to the table? Like what's the new thing you're gonna bring? Because as far as we concerned, the conceit of Terminator has been exhausted, what I mean, throughout these movies, right? The whole idea of Judgment Day and Skynet and all these things, right?
Right.
So it's like, what is this show gonna bring to the table? So we'll answer that in our review. So Ricardo, take it away. What was Terminator Zero about?
Sure. Yeah, Terminator Zero is about this timeline where the events of Skynet playing out as it is, and we follow this scientist named Malcolm who having dreams about the end of the world. And you're wondering, hey, how this guy having dreams of the end of the world? He's some normal scientist in 1990, seven, whatever, right? And he has his own like built-in company, this tech company, and he running things, and he and his kids living a life, and then the Terminator comes back, and we follow multiple characters going through and in and out another a time travel narrative about the future war. So the question is, what's going on and why? Cool, right? That is the big question, and we don't know the big mystery having to answer in terms of who Malcolm is and why. The relationship between him, what timeline, what the Terminators want to do, and then Judgment Day itself, because it's in the timeline according to Arnold and Terminator 2 about that. Yeah, and I said, we build that and we get 8 episodes of a pretty solid Terminator story. And this is a classic case of hear me now, quote me later, because yeah, this was something like Genesis should have been. I
I
don't think
was
this is
thinking the same exact thing. I was watching,
yeah,
like, wow, if the showrunners behind the show were on board with Genesis, yeah, this should have been the story we could have got with that film.
yeah. And that's why I was kind of slightly frustrated about this because it's something I said since way back when. Hey, these things would work better if we just just let it breathe a little bit, right? Yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
yeah, yeah. And that is so said, so done. We get that. Um, Mildly frustrating that they just kind of you know won't do these things. But yeah, that's why I just kind of see it. I just it tell a solid story. Not a masterpiece. But still good. Just like all right, they address this thing and they address that question and the other problems and issues I always had with the franchise. Hey, why don't you answer this or that or the other? And yeah, that's pretty much it. Like it just tells the story. But yeah, so yeah, before we get into spoilers, but it I think this is just a nice stunt out and again address a bunch of issues that Sarah Connor Chronicles do, but it pulled from a little bit of Dark Fate, and then it does I don't want to be uncharitable and say call it Terminator Romulus, but it kind of does what Alien Romulus did for the Alien franchise a little bit, but not as ridiculous as that. And yeah, that is it. I really like this. I can't say I super loved it, but good. Again, if this was Genesis and they just give the goddamn thing something a time to breed, it'd be great. Because like if this was squished down into 2.5 hours or whatever, it would be terrible. But it wasn't. Right? It was roughly 4 hours of material, a little over that I think, and yeah, they should have do that. That's about it. See what's up when you give these things time to breed.
Yeah, yeah,
It'll be
yeah.
fine. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you for the most part, right? So just to get the flaws out the way, right? I felt in terms of what the show was had set out to be, it really took a long while to get to that point. I felt like since this is 8 episodes, I felt like in episode 4, that's when it started to. That's when you really started to see the identity of Terminator Zero, right?
Right,
Because like the sequels, like the live action sequels, yeah, there was references and nods to the older movies, right? So
right,
case
right,
in point, there's a, I don't want to call it a blatant nod, but like when you see the context of it, it's like you're drawing from both Terminator 1 and 2 for one big action set piece, right?
right.
Involving the villain, right? Who actually, because I was actually watching the English dub, right? And I will say the English dub is really solid, right? It's
Right.
just because the story is set in Japan. Sometimes some voice actors see the names kind of off. You know what I mean?
Right,
So
right, right.
like, yeah, like some like there's a character called Misaki, right?
Right, right, right.
And sometimes they will a character, I'm not gonna say who, will pronounce it in this sort of off kind of fashion. And I remember just sort of hearing it in Japanese, that same line in Japanese, like,
Yeah.
no, well, it sounds better in
Right.
Japanese, right? But other than that, though, I thought that the English dub was solid, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I watched it in Japanese. It's
Okay,
fine
okay.
because the entire story was in Tokyo. But
Yeah,
I so that's
yeah. Right. Yeah. But I'll talk about the English dub in a bit, right? But yeah, you will see references and callbacks to the older films or whatnot. There's subtle references to the sequels as well. Like there's
right,
one involving the Terminator that will be the villain. Well, the villainous Terminator. I should say the Terminator actually in this entire season,
right.
right?
Yeah,
Who is
you
again?
don't really
Yeah.
have one to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And he does something similar to what TX does in
Right,
Terminator 3, right? Where
right, right, right,
basically it involves hacking into systems, right? He does
right,
something like that, right? So yeah, I felt like, okay, like I'm just watching it, and again, like it just sort of felt like, okay, what is this all building up to? Like you have Malcolm, who in terms of the English dub is voiced by my boy Andre Holland of all people, right? And I hear in his voice, and I was like, dude, you are doing a great Jeffrey Wright impression, Dre. Trust
For
me.
real.
Hear
Yeah.
the English dub and hear his voice. It's legit sound like Jeffrey Wright way. That sort of old, brooding kind of voice, right? But it fit the character. I'll give it that. It fit the character, right? But as they're like watching, okay, he's worried about Judgment Day, and he's talking about, time zones, and well, Skynet will do the thing in America, hours before Japan, and all these kind of things. And they're like, all right, okay. And then the Terminator is sent into 97 to do his thing. And then there's this resistance soldier by the name of Echo who shows up, and
Right.
she doing she thing, and then you have Malcolm's
And
family.
yeah,
You
she
just
kind of
watching all
remind
this.
me. Yeah, it could kind of remind me of Mackenzie Davis from Dark Fate a little bit.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, you're right.
I find she was a little like kind of strong though because like she was fighting Terminator pretty on equal footing at parts. But I don't know if like
Yeah.
this Terminator was kind of weak. Like it was kind of unclear to me if she is either she's strong or this Terminator kind of weak. I'm not sure
Oh,
because like that opening sequence with her, the Terminator was shooting and like missing. Like oh she fast.
yeah.
What going on?
Yeah, yeah,
Right,
that was kind of weird too. But they
right,
do allude to something that will happen to her afterwards, which might suggest why she was able to stand up to her, right? But yeah,
right,
point again, that is with all the rambling and stuff I was just doing there, is that like you just there what getting the vibe of the show itself, right? And just stick with flaws a little bit more. Um, like while I did not mind the existential nature of this show here, right? I felt like it leaned a little too much into that and did not give us the action goods that we would expect from a Terminator show. So, in other
right,
words, like I went in sort of expecting to get, intense action scenes, because that's where you come into for Terminator. That's where you come into Terminator show 4, right? Not to hear about the end of the world and the end of the world. Like that was always like this background noise as far as those movies go, right? Like it was there, it was in, it was always present, but it wasn't all up in your face. And I felt like this show was like that, right? But
Yeah.
somewhere like I think it's round season, episode 4, where I would say characters meet each other and the story start to flesh itself out even more. That's when I got the gist of it, right? And that's where I really started to understand the vibe of what it was going for, right? So on to the positives. I do applaud the tone that they stuck with this show here. This whole existential tone of it. With Malcolm in particular, talking about just wanting to stop Judgment Day, right? And then the more you learn about the story, the more you understand why he's going through all this existential dread, right? And it has to do with this AI called Kokoro, who in the English dub is voiced by McGill Rosario Dawson.
Okay, that's okay. I didn't check.
I didn't even realize.
Okay, all right. I was listening to the Japanese, sorry, so I don't know who was the American voice. Right, no problem.
Yeah, but there's a great episode where they actually explain how she was born, right? So to speak.
Yeah. His backstory is great. Yeah, it's obvious now. Like it was obvious, like how you doing all of this. Right, it was obvious, but like it's a good beat to land the narrative on. Yeah.
Yeah, like
they also
why you kind of know it in your head why he feeling this way, right? Or where he come from, so to speak, right? But when you show it, it's like, okay, now I get it. I like that they didn't have to stop to give you all the details as to why he ends up in the place that he is, and does what he does. I love that.
Yeah. And but the dirty thing that I like that again, Dark Fate could have done better, or other material could have done better, which is the whole John Connor not important kind of thing, but also the futility of time travel. Like they also address that, which I liked, which I also was really smart, and they get into that again. All of this could have been Genesis, because it's very similar to Genesis in many conceits of the time travel within a time travel, and you're using other time travel to stop other time travel kind of thing. Right, and so it was not terrible. Like again, not frustrating. Again, not as ingratiating as something like we call it Alien Romulus,
Romulus,
but still good. Still very, very good. Again, we should have get something like this 10 years ago. I forget who it was who was telling me, you need to put Terminator in theaters and so on. So I forget who was telling me that. I'm like, no, bro, you're missing the picture. You had to let things breathe, put it on streaming. The Terminator franchise is not the thing that you think it is anymore. It don't need to be this big event. Just let it breathe. Give it time to breathe and it'll work. And it's a real damn shame we couldn't get this with Terminator Genesis or the other movies. A live action version of this in America. You could have tell this exact same story, live action in America, and this would have stick with people better, by far better. I don't know. Just
for one thing, sorry.
No, yeah, my last point, just I don't know if this kind of take away from it a little bit, but having it in Japan, just kind of pull it away a little bit, because I find Terminator is a specifically American thing. But again, I get for the sake of the story. For the sake of the story, it don't really matter. I don't need to reference John Connor or any of that bullshit, right? You don't need to go that Alien Romulus with it or anything like that. But I felt it should have been specifically American, right? In some way, this could have, instead of being LA, it could have been New York or whatever. And but the reason why Japan was a problem for me is because it just kind of like it just too ghost in the shell now. Like I keep thinking standalone complex carry these ideas in way more interesting places. So like, why doing this with them now as it is? I don't know. That is not necessarily a nitpick, but aesthetically just kind of off to me, because I just keep thinking standalone complex. Whatever. Moving on. It don't matter.
Right.
It's not a problem.
Well, that's actually a great point, because I was about to say I actually like the fact that they shifted the focus from the States to another country, right?
Right, but
they make
not
a strong point in terms of its placement in Japan as well, right?
Right. If it was Europe, or it could be Britain, London, something like that, but not Japan. Whatever. It's not a big deal, but it just distracts me, because I keep thinking, they're gonna go full standalone complex with this. That's how I felt. Whatever. It don't really matter. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're right. And one thing I also like about this show is that even when I like how they address the whole aspect of timelines of the Terminator franchise. So in other words, it's pretty much saying that what we saw in Dark Fate may not exactly be what happened after the second Terminator, right? So it's different timelines.
Right,
There's
right.
a great scene, right, which involves Eco, right, and a character called the Prophet, who I swear is supposed to be Sarah Connor.
Okay,
And I think they was kind of alluding to it, kind of, because she says something, right?
okay,
But the way how she said it, well, I think again I watched the English dub, right? It sounded like a Sarah Connor thing. That's what it
okay,
was.
no problem. Yeah,
Basically she swore, yeah. Basically
that
she
plausible.
cussed, yeah. She cussed now, but the way how
Right,
I'm sorry, how to say it? She said it in a very well. The point that she was making, she said it in a very blunt, very cynical kind of way, and it felt
right.
very Sarah Connor to me, right?
Okay, yeah,
And in
that
that
sounds
scene,
plausible. Yeah,
yeah, and in that scene, she and Prophet and Echo is talking about how timelines work, right? So I like that it is a representation of time travel, from what we've seen before, right? And it's a kind of perspective that, like for me, without spoiling much, like I usually see time travel as a straight line kind of thing, right? And
right,
the prophet say, no, it's actually not that way. It's supposed to be this way, right? And then when
right,
you really think about it, it's like, yeah, you're right, right? But what I love though is that the show does not require you to stop and think, maybe that's why everything that we saw before is the way it was. Like it's
right,
not for you to overthink it. It's just basically at the end of the day, it's all about these characters dealing with the threat of the future and being told that like some people will tell themselves, okay, we need to stop Judgment Day, we need to stop Skynet, we need to pull the plug on this AI and on Kokoro and all these things. And somebody else will come and say, no, 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 that needs to happen because if that don't happen, then your children will get born or the resistance will get born and all these other things now. So
right.
it touches on familiar themes, but explores it in really fascinating ways. I actually applaud the show for doing that, right? But at the same time, when it comes to the action, we do get it, but it's not as much as all that. But when it's there, it's very brutal, it's very vicious, it's
Yeah,
anime. So, of course, you're going to see blood, you're going to see people heads get crunched and all that kind of stuff. It's very brutal, right? As far as the Terminator go, by the way, as I said before, or if I didn't say it, I'm going to mention now, it's voiced by Timothy Oliphant of all people.
okay,
He is pretty much like a mixture of Alan Schwarzenegger and Robert Patrick. That's where they're going forward it, right?
right.
There's a weapon that he uses, a crossbow, right? And at first
Yeah,
when I
yeah.
saw it, I'm like, all right, bro, why would you use a crossbow? Though? Like I like
Well,
the
yeah.
way no,
Again,
I
this
get like
character
I don't
felt
know if
like
this is supposed to be like if the idea is that we want to do something a little bit different, or if it's a Japanese thing. So because of the context of how he found the weapon, it's like all right, I get, but dog, you
well,
from a
right, right. So
you,
we see him one in his body. So he's not like full TX, but he's like seems a lot more advanced than Arnold. And
right?
in terms of look, he look a lot more like you remind me of okay, so if I remember correctly, originally the Terminator was supposed to be Lance Henriksen, I think, originally, right?
Okay,
Uh,
okay.
so the idea is that you had to get somebody looking normal now. And well Lance
Yeah.
Henriksen went on to become a robot in Aliens, funny enough. But
Mhm.
that was like a complaint that they find Arnold Schwarzenegger was a little too conspicuous. No? Like, oh, this dude definitely looks like a killer machine kind of thing. No? So you had to get somebody who kind of dumpy and normal. No? Yeah, and I find this guy look a little bit like a Lance Henriksen. Kind of remind me of that a little bit. Like it remind me of that. Like I say, yeah, he's looking like that's what they're going for with the look now. But I like where they have him where he not like Arnold, but he not like the TX either in terms of the look, and I like the look. It is a cool look. He was evolving over time. You see him modified with modern machines. He had the ability to control other machines, as they say, which is cool, and so on and so forth. Yeah,
And just a little minor spoiler here because you did mention we was going to touch on spoilers. Yeah, he even does a little T1000 thing by grabbing a police bike and driving around and with rocking police clothes at a point in time, right? And similar to part one with the raid in the police station, yeah, he does that as well too. He roll up in a police station, start killing people with that crossbow, and I think at this point that's when you're like, oh, that's why he used the crossbow. Okay, but I like that
right,
he still had a gun on him. Also, no points. Like, dog, this is, as you mentioned, folks, this is an altered future, right? So in this
right.
future, we have like robotics and all that kind of stuff, right? So why the cops have like handguns, bro? I did watching them like firing
Yeah,
shots with handguns, or like handguns and then automatic weapons. Like, dog, like what if this is the 50s, bro? What?
it was weird. Well,
It
that's
was
the thing.
weird. It was weird.
That's the thing. It was the present, but like Japan was still was really super advanced. Well, because we know why, right? Because you learn about Malcolm Lee's true nature and what he about and why he doing what he doing.
Yeah.
Um, so that's fine. So I get like all the technology would have just been in his company. I forget the name of his company, Camden Industries or something like that. But yeah, that whole thing was that done bother me too much. My only issue, what they did was with was the girl named AO. uh uh
Equal, yeah.
Echo, sorry, yeah. She know I like what they did with her. So one of the big issues with Terminator, and I felt they could have done this a little more, like with his character, if anything, is the idea that, oh well, even if you go back in the past, you won't just be using shotguns or whatever it is. You'll try to come up with weapons to fight back, and we got that with her. Like I like that it did the whole this
The
acid thing
bombs,
she had.
yeah, the acid
Yeah,
bombs. I
the
like
acid
that.
bomb
Yeah,
thing,
that
which
was
is clever
good. Yeah,
because she know it's not like it's just anything, but she know at least chemistry and technology and knowledge of the future to fight instead of like Kyrie's dumbass who don't know anything. He just know to build a couple pipe bombs.
yeah.
It had something like legitimately like effective against the machines in the past because you have all the materials to do it. You have the knowledge. You're going back with your know-how instead of just actual technology now, and so on and so forth, right? I thought that was like small. They could have do more with that, but I thought that was particularly clever. Anyway, I don't know.
Just a few things, just a few
Yeah,
quick
sure.
things, and then we wrap up, right? So, we're talking about this, that, and the third, but we got to talk about the animation, right? Provided by
Right.
production IG, right?
Yes.
Solid for the most part, right?
Right.
Nothing too
Competent. Good.
spectacular. It's competent.
Yeah.
As we'd expect from a show like this, they do incorporate some VFX, here or there, and it's seamless enough, right? But it's stuff that admittedly I've seen before, even when it comes to, especially with cyberpunk anime, right? So there was nothing
Right.
too spectacular animation wise, right? But for the most part, it works, right? I only saw one episode in Japanese, and I thought the dub there was fine, but I'm more stuck with the English dub.
Right.
Just mainly to hear Andre Hollett do his best.
Right. Right.
Jeffrey Wright impersonation, but I think like for me, Malcolm Lee is the most fascinating character in this
Yeah. Great
entire
character.
show, and he wasn't one note. Like I thought he was going to be one note all the time, just
Me
talking
too.
about woe is me and what am I going to do, but nah, they actually develop his character a lot more, and especially with that flashback episode, or at least
Right.
how he ended up in this situation. I absolutely love that episode. I think that episode is the best out of that season here, right? And I should mention one last thing though. The music I thought for the most part was decent, right? There's like little like you had to hear closely, but they do harken back to Brad Fiedels. I think that's the name of the composers. Terminator music, mean that dun 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 dun. You hear it
Right.
very subtly here or there, especially when the Terminator shows up as well, right? Yeah. Just to wrap things up, though. Yeah, this was a solid show. Well, I should say a solid season of this show here, right? It starts off pretty slow in the sense that it is they're kind of wondering, okay, what are they getting at here? What's the vibe going on? Why are they being all existential about things? I come to see Terminators shoot people and get shot at. That's what I'm here for. But then when it starts to really get its footing, that and you really get the flow of it, it's like, oh, okay, that's what they're going for. So it's not so much about the action and the visceral nature of it. It's all about the existential nature of it all. And it's not just about, trying to stop Judgment Day, but that's the idea of fate, right? Fate is a big theme about all of this, right? Do you just embrace it? Do you just stand and just embrace the fate of what will happen to you, or do you do something about it, right? I love how the show explodes it, right? I mean, let me be real. It's not original or anything like that, right? Especially when it comes to shows about time travel. You've seen stuff like this before, right? But honestly, I've never seen this sort of detail put into a Terminator film. You know what I mean? In a long while, right? So I will say this, right, before I get to rating. This, in terms of enhancing the material of the franchise, I would say this did way more than the last four sequels did, right? That
Yeah.
would be
Exactly.
from Terminator 3 up to Dark Fate. Like they
Right.
just
And
did
and
so much.
and it's a simple reason. They let the story breathe. That's
Yeah,
it.
the
Because
format is
again,
better. 8 episodes, not two
yeah.
hours or an hour and 40 minutes to tell a story.
Exactly.
Come on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it always that's the problem with the Terminator because the franchise expands and because of the nature of the franchise where it can keep naturally expanding plot wise, you have to like come up with new things to make it make sense. And a lot of people they just absolutely refuse to do that for whatever reason. They absolutely refuse to do that. So like, oh well, it's a big surprise that you'll just be either treading in the same place or running in the same place, or you won't do anything interesting with it going forward. But with this, did I say, look, the nature of the story, you tell a brand new story. Just tell a new story, go with that. Tell a new story, build from there. And that is what they did with this. They just tell a brand new story. They didn't barely, I don't think we mentioned any John Connor or anything like that, but they do mention
No.
Sky, they mention Skynet's efforts and how no, like John Connor not as important. Again, Dark Fate did this, but this one did it better. Like and so on and so forth. Is a shame. Like again, a live action version of this, in my humble opinion, in an American or European city would have click a lot better for people. But that is neither here nor there, as I said. I still really like this for what it was because again, it's just conscientious thinking about the franchise. It's shocking that they take
Yes.
this goddamn long to get this done. Because I really wish that again a live action version of this could have do this on thing, hype it up, get some good actors, get some big names, come true for this instead of just like Emilia Clarke half-assing it and wasting she time 10 years ago. They could have do a way better version of this and Light Breed on television, whatever.
Yeah.
Uh
Rated.
Still give it
What
a
do you
great
give it?
score. Yeah, give it a great score, like a 8, closer to a 9. Love it, but I didn't super love it because I felt there's something that we could have do 10 years ago. But whatever, it's still great, still out, and still, this is what you're supposed to do, kids. That's how you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll give it like
All
an
right.
8 out of 10.
All right. Well, I didn't super love it neither. As much as I was appreciating the existential tone of it,
Yeah,
I felt we could have still gotten the action goods, man. Like I felt like they were just skimping on the action, right? Now, I mean, if it's in the service of telling the story, fine. But again, normally, when it comes to Terminator movies, we come or films or whatever, we come for the action. You could give us, the seriousness of it all, yes, but we kind of come for the action. I felt that we didn't get much of it in this 8 episode run, right? But that being said, though, I still really enjoy this. So for me, I'm gonna give this a light 4 out of 5. I think that it is worth checking out if you're a Terminator fan. I think that you'll enjoy it, man. But if you're the one who just kind of tune into these shows just to see, explosions and gunshots, then I don't think you'll like this one.
right.
But there's a lot of thought and effort put into this, a lot of
Yeah,
forward-thinking stuff
smart.
in this, right? Very smart writing here.
Yeah,
I'll give it that, right? And I don't know when we're gonna get the next season. I hope that we get one because they kind of stop at a cliffhanger. They can't just say that's
right.
the
A little
end.
bit. Yeah, yeah.
No, 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 you can't do that. No. But yeah, I think they could continue on with this, right? And I'll close this, right? I think that yeah, this should be the approach going forward, right? Like continue the story through I don't know, games, I guess, but really more through the anime format. I think like this is just like an untapped market that, the kind folks, creating who behind the franchise haven't tapped into. I'm glad that they did that. So I think that, this show could be the way forward. We just continue
Right.
to expand on the material and tell these really fascinating and dare I say thought-provoking stories, right? But instead of saying, all right, so before, Arnold, decide to do something else with your life, let me see if we can bring him in one more time. One more
Right.
time. Like before he turned 80, yeah, right now he's 77. Yeah, they just bring him one more time for a live action movie. It's like, nah, you don't need to do that. Stick with this
Right.
approach, right? But I don't know
Yeah.
if you have anything to say about like if you think this should be the way to progress the
No,
franchise.
as I say with the franchise, you don't need to like bring back or nothing. I mean, it's kind of like Star Trek, right? You can just move on, and you don't need to necessarily reference the past. You have people who's be like the brain is just get cooked with respect to like continuity crap, and well, you have to reference the past and so on. So no, you don't need to do all of that. Just tell a story. Because of the nature of Skynet, you can keep going forward and say, oh no, it's just another timeline, no, it's another blah blah blah, and so on, so on, and so forth. And again, Dark Fate hinted at this, but just Dark Fate kind of squandered the premise. It's a shame that Dark Fate could have do so much more with its conceit, but you get the point, right? And so on and so forth. That's how I feel about it. Yeah, great. Still dug the hell out of it.